All right. Looks like we are live now. Well, so if you were in the last live stream, what we were working on was this head. And we're going to continue with this project. However, I'm going to make some changes to it. So last time I talked about it being like a dinosaur or some kind of a dragon character. And we went with the fleece, but we're going to actually change it up. I'm going to make this into a fur-covered character, and I'm looking for more of a wolf dog-like shape, and I think it's going to be really great, which is also part of why this is going to be a live hand, or rather a sack puppet build for today. So I've got my fur ready, and why don't we just jump into it? So I'm going to leave this part of the head as fleece covered for now. In the next video, I will cover this with fur and attach it and add features, and I think that's going to look really great. But for now, we're going to start making the sack body pattern. So here we go. So I'm going to put this on this stand for now, so I have something to kind of work from. So the first step, what you want to do in creating the sack puppet pattern is to actually drape the neck, because that's going to inform the connection of it to the head. So that's going to be my first step. So I'm going to start draping some fabric right now. Okay. And I have, actually I'll use this, I'll just use this cheap felt so that it is, this just be for the pattern anyway. So I'm not going to make the whole thing going all the way down. I'm not going to make the complete sack body pattern out of this felt. I'm just going to do the upper neck part and then extend it all from there and add some notches and whatnot where I need it. So what I'm going to start off doing is cutting this, whoops, in half like this. I have my pins handy here. You always have to have pins. And I'm going to start draping it. So let me bring it down here so you can see a little better, hopefully. Okay. Now I'm going to start on this center seam here. And on the body pattern, there's not going to be any center or side seam on this pattern that I'm making. I'm just going to make, I should say, a center back seam or a center front seam. There will be side seams. I'm just going to curve this around. And actually, let me just cut this down so it's not, so you guys have a little bit of a better idea of what you're looking at too. So actually, if you've seen my other, one of my other videos, it's how to make the fleece covering for the puppet. That is, part of that is in here. It's how to make the neck for it. It's actually linked right now down in the description. And if you click that link there, it'll actually start you right where the neck starts off. So that's what I'm going to do here, is find about the center of this. I just did a curve. I'm not sure if it's the right curve. I'm just kind of guessing at that shape right now. So I'm going to kind of create a center mark here, right there. Okay. And then I'm going to pin it to the side here. Just like that, okay? And that's going to mark what my center back of the puppet is. Okay. So next, let me switch it back over to the other camera so you can see kind of how it comes down the side. So it's on the stand now. Now what I want this to do is to lie flat down this way, because that's the way I'm going to be performing it, like this, okay? So that's kind of the contour that I want to follow. So I'm going to follow this around just like this, making sure it lies nice and even. Oops. I may have to tape that so it doesn't keep falling. I have a feeling it'll fall again. Okay. Let me put one right here. Okay, that looks good. Might get a little feedback here. Ouch. Careful with the pins. Double check that I am live now. Okay, I'm good. Sorry, I just wanted to double check that this was live. I didn't get confirmation. Okay. So that looks pretty good for my side. I don't technically need to do the whole thing, but I'm gonna go around the other side as well too. Whoops. Okay. Okay. So I'm gonna go a little bit further. That hanging down like that. Okay. That seems pretty good. All right. So I think I want my side seam to be right about here. And part of why I'm choosing that is because I can see, I always try to make my seams like real even. Because if you look right here on the top of this head, I have a perfect X, you know, and depending on the shape of the head that you are designing, that's really what you always kind of want to aim for. Because then sometimes if you have one that's acute, one that's more obtuse, that it's just not best practice. So I would definitely recommend trying to keep those even. So I'm going to try to continue essentially where that line would be, which would make a good side seam that makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to start that line down right there. And we don't need to go very far, okay? And in fact, I don't even need to do the other side either, because I have a center seam here, and it's just going to be mirrored anyway. So, but anyway, so let me just trim up that side so I don't have that fleece, or that felt rather, in the way. Okay. And now I'm going to drape the inner part of the neck. And again, this is for creating a sack puppet pattern. This is just the upper part. The rest of it, the arms and the body, we're going to kind of draft that separately. Okay. So let me just take a hunk of this felt. Normally I would use, a cheap fleece for this, but again, I just don't have any, and didn't have time to stop, so that's what I'm going to do. So now if I just try using this flat edge, so this will kind of explain a little better why I started off with that curve at the top. If I just try doing this flat edge here, okay, it reaches the bottom of the chin, but it doesn't reach up here. Okay, if you can see that spot, there's like a little bit of a gap right there. Let me move my finger so you can see it there. Okay, so to help compensate for that, I just want to cut a little bit of a U shape right here. Now, how much do you do? Kind of do it by eye. It looks like it's about, 1.5 inches from, if I look at it straight from this edge, I'll even shut the mouth quick. From the bottom of this chin to up here is the distance we want, which again, I'm going to just use my fingers, about 2 fingers wide for me. So if I do 2 fingers wide here, that's about what it is. So I'm going to kind of guess a little bit on how wide to make it for now. That looks about right. And hopefully I'm not too far off, and I'll know for sure once I start pinning. So. Okay, that looks okay. Now let me just trim this side too. Oh, and actually let me mark a center seam on this. All right. So that's my center seam. You can see it in the top camera there. And let me pin that in right here. Oh, that's not a pin. Oh, that is a pin. But I grabbed a needle on accident. Okay, just like that. And it looks like, let me turn it this way. It's kind of hard to do it for the camera and be able to see it myself. So let me just kind of lean over here. Looks like I nailed it actually. It fits right in there. So let me do this. I'll gently pin it. Have it line up all the way over there. Make sure I go straight to that edge that I drew on the back of the neck piece, okay? And just to make sure this sits the way that I want it to, so let me just trim this so you can see a little bit. I want you to see what it's naturally doing, because it's doing exactly what it should do, which is awesome. Now, if you look here, let me trim that side. If you look here, it's kind of naturally doing this little bit of a bell shape, which, you know, depending on the design that you want, it may be perfect. And it is exactly what I'm looking for. Whenever you look at these kind of sack puppets, they kind of have a little bit of that bell shape to it, which is really nice. Okay, and again, it's naturally doing that. There are things you can do to prevent that, and that would be the angle of which you cut those neck holes. You know, the more narrow it is, or rather more flat it is, the flatter it is, I think it would end up being closer to the body. If it's a little bit exaggerated, the further out it'll be. Fully exaggerated would be a full circle, in which case it would be flat like a poncho. So think of it that way, okay? But again, I really like how that's lying. So what I want to do is just kind of draw that center seam. Now, looking at it, so if I pull back on this piece here, you can see, actually let me just draw it with my finger first. Here. If I draw it with my finger, hold on, it's kind of lagging, sorry. This right here is the perfect center seam. But if I go down here, you see this back fabric doesn't reach it. So I'm going to have to extend that when I draft it, okay? So let me just draw it as far down as I can on this front piece. I'm going to start right here and draw straight down. I hope that's straight. Again, from my angle, it's a little hard to tell, but it looks straight on that camera there, okay? And again, looking back here, it looks like it can really only go just a couple inches, unless I bring it in, have it a little less bell shape, which actually, that's what I'm going to do, actually. I think I'm going to keep that straight edge there. Yeah, I'm going to keep that straight edge and just use this. Okay. Now, let me trim on this line and then add some notches, some registration marks. Okay. Yeah. Let me pin that and see how that looks. Alrighty. How does that look? Oh yeah, that's pretty good. It's not perfectly straight, but I can, let me turn this over just a little bit. Like that. Maybe I'll use that line that I drew first. Is that a little straighter? I think, yeah, that's better. Okay. So I'm going to trim down that line. Perfect. Okay. Now I'll add some of these registration marks. One right there. Pretty good. One right there. That's enough for what we're doing, just to get it kind of lined up. And just to make sure it's clear for the video, I'll kind of continue this line straight down as well in the back. And I'll do the same in the front, kind of holding this up where it was, and come straight down. Boom. Now I'll take all this off and we'll see what we have. Oops. Actually, I think I'm going to be done with that for a while at least. All right, let me switch cameras here. All right, so this is what we have so far. So let me get some paper so that we can start drafting the rest of it. Okay. Okay, I'm going to start off just drafting the back of the live hand puppet, and then I will do the front afterward, okay? And also, I think I'm just going to end up doing half of it so that we can just mirror it. However, I do like using one full piece for my patterns. But I'll show you other ways. The best place is to chop those patterns as well to maximize the use of your fur. So, okay, so again, I'm just going to also star the sides that we're using so that you guys can follow along a little bit easier with the video. Okay, so looking at this, I'm just going to carefully chop right up this. Okay, that looks about right. And I'll get my pencil. Okay. Do I have a long straight edge? Okay. Here we go. Use this long ruler. It's going to start off with just a center line here. Again, this is the center back that we're going to be creating. And I'll call it CV. And for those of you who are familiar with pattern making, true pattern making, this is the symbol that you use for when something is going to be mirrored or in the center, okay? But again, you don't only really do that if you had half of a pattern. And we're going to do the whole thing anyway, so it's kind of a little bit of overkill. But there you go. And actually, can you guys see that? Maybe should I go over it with Sharpie? I'll go over it with Sharpie so you can see it a little better. And normally, again, I would just use pencil for all this. I will switch to Sharpie for the viewers at home. Center back. Okay, there we are. Okay, so now I'm just going to kind of gently trace out this neck pattern, just like this. This is our front. I'm sorry, no, this is the back. Sorry, I don't want to get you guys confused. I'm just going to go down that far because I don't remember how far it really went. I'll add those registration marks that we added in. Okay. So, there we go. That's our front neck of the pattern. Now, the next part we're going to jump into, this is actually going to start going fast, at least for the pattern making process of this, because it just is. You know, once we get to the sewing part, it can get a little bit tedious because of the hand sewing you have to do around the hands. Okay, so let me switch to the front here. I'll talk about it. So to make the actual hand part, okay, I actually already did a complete video on that. That's called How to Make a Live Hand, How to Make Live Hands for Your Puppet. If you just search that on YouTube, it's already linked down in the description, and I'll add the tab right there as well. Okay. But we learn how to draft this pattern, okay? Now, first of all, this is a pattern that you can get for free on my website by downloading it. And you can just trace it for this part of the pattern, okay? If you're going to make your own sack puppet, that is. And now, if you don't have a printer, or if you have trouble downloading it, which is, you should have no trouble downloading it, you can, in that video, I show you exactly how to draft this and how to draw it, okay? So, and the reason why I actually never really explained it, but in pretty much all my videos, even the ones where I have the patterns downloadable for free, I show how to make it anyway, because I know that a lot of people don't have a printer or don't have access to a printer, or they just like seeing the process of where that pattern came from, okay? So that's why I make it available. But again, the reason why I'm not redrafting this now is because I already did an entire video on how to do that. So we're going to use this one, okay? Now here's the thing. Now, how wide should your puppet be? How tall should your puppet be? Whatever you want is the answer, okay? I actually have a full pattern available, downloadable on my website for a sack puppet pattern. So, you know, if you guys want to skip this entire process, you can download it there. It's a very reasonable price, and it helps to support our channel a lot. So, if you want to find a way to help support the channel and keep more of these videos coming, I'd really appreciate you helping out with that. So anyway, enough of that. I'm going to think about how tall do I want my puppet to be. So if I'm going to perform my puppet like this, okay, I want to find a comfortable position, okay? So I'm going to say, actually I'm going to reverse it because we already started doing this side. I'm going to have my puppet like this. So if I was doing the head like this and the live hand like this seems like a comfortable distance to be. So what I'm going to do is take my hands just like this and just fall forward. Okay, you can see on the top camera. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. Now remember, this here is the neck. So technically this hand would be higher up. So let me just bring this down so you can see. So essentially the head would be right here. Okay, so if I'm doing my puppet like this is a good comfortable position. This is how you decide how wide your puppet's going to be. I'm going to go like this. I'm going to bring my wrist down, okay, right on the center line, the center of my wrist on that line. And my other hand was about here, okay? So I'm going to leave my hand here. So this is where I want my live hand to be. So I'm going to take this pattern, and you want thumbs in, okay? I'm going to line up this pattern with my thumb and put it right about there, okay? So that seems about right to me. So this is, actually maybe I gesture a little further. So this is probably would be stationary, but the furthest I can gesture is probably about here. So I'll come down again. Yeah, I'm actually going to want a little bit further out there, okay? So that's what you want to do. Find where it's comfortable. Find where you would gesture the furthest with your puppet and bring that down like this, okay? Which is about there, for mine, anyway. Again, yours might be sized to you. So what I'm going to do next is just trace this out. I'm just going to trace the upper part of it. I hope I explained that well. I kind of feel like I'm babbling a little bit more than I usually do today. Sorry about that. It's part of going live. Okay, so just like that. So now it's really starting to look like a live hand puppet pattern, to me at least, if you're familiar with them at all. Now I will say, don't... On this puppet that we're building right now, it has a much wider neck than probably, I think, any hand puppet that I've built before. Just looking at, again, that's a very much wider hole than we usually have with most of the puppets I've built. So this one is very unique to this puppet. But actually, the one on my website that's for sale matches the size of the other monster puppet pattern on my website. So those heads are interchangeable because the monster pattern comes with, the one that I have on my website comes with, an oval-shaped head pattern. It comes with the body pattern. It comes with the forefinger, but it also comes with a variation of a 5-finger pattern. And also it has a pattern for the lining for the hooping, if you want to add the hooping to your puppet. If you don't know what the hooping is, that's what keeps it open and makes it look like it has a body, okay? And I did a whole video on that, is how to make hooping for your sack puppet. So look that up. It's also already down in the description as well. So now what I'm going to do is essentially kind of connect these, okay? What I'm going to start to do is, let me do pencil first, even if it's a little hard to see, you can just kind of see what I'm doing, okay? Because you got to think about, another thing I should say too, I like to make this edge parallel to the center line. I know some people like the hand sticking out this way. If you want to do that, that is totally fine. What I find though is I like to do it this way, because either way you can still, it's fabric, you can turn your hand this way. But also as far as, cutting this out of fur, you're saving so much fur, because this is sticking out this way. You have this whole corner of waste then, okay? So I like to do it this way. Again, you can do whatever you want. I'm going to switch the cameras to the top view so you can see this better, okay? So I'm going to start drawing what I feel it should do, okay? Now you can make, if you want to, you can make this dip down a lot. That'll make it a puppet with a very long kind of neck and body. Okay, the shorter up you make this, though, the more, the bigger the puppet feels. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. Which one should you do? It depends on the character that you're designing. Okay, kind of if you look at the old Oscar puppet, I feel like he's got a really long. I'm talking the orange one. I feel like he's got a much longer neck. and it's more kind of like this. But if you look at other puppets, I feel like this is the more of the norm here. Okay, kind of bringing it up like this. Now, actually, another thing I'm going to do, just because the fleece has a lot of stretch to it, okay? And when I make this out of fleece, this is no problem at all, this pattern. But with the fur, it can be a little snug. It doesn't have as much stretch as the fleece does. So I'm actually I'm gonna come down from the middle of the thumb, just to make it a little bit smoother to, slide your hand in real quick, okay? So I think that looks pretty good to me. That's my personal choice. That's down fur enough, so I'm going to commit to this line. I'm going to come in just a little bit more than I had it. Like that. All right, now the next thing. How long to make it? You can make this as long as you want, you know. Depends on, if you're building this for a specific commercial that you're shooting, or a specific, YouTube video or web series or whatever it is, a film. Build it as long as you need. If you think you need a lot of coverage, add that in, okay? What I would say is add probably about 2 or 3 inches more than you think you need, though, because it always ends up being, feeling longer than it is. So I'm just thinking, when I have my puppet, let me switch the cameras back again. Oh, I gotta stop saying that. I just gotta do it. So when I have my puppet, if you're performing for a live show, you might want it a little shorter, okay? Like this. Maybe you'll just want it down to about here, so you can measure this distance. But if you are performing over your head for film use, okay, you probably want it to come down to probably about your eyebrows. That's what I like to do for film, so that way the top of your head can kind of be inside it, even though you'll normally turn your head a little bit. So about to here, so that way it doesn't, I can kind of put the top of my head inside it, and it won't have my hair showing, okay? But that way I can still see everything. So I'm just gonna, I'm gonna measure that distance. I'm gonna grab my tape measure. Okay. So what I'm gonna actually do, just to make this a little, this is really weird. I'm going to tape this to my wrist. If I had an extra person here, I'd actually just have them do it. Hold it to my wrist. But I'm going to take this this tape measure here. I'm going to attach it, tape it to my wrist right there. Hold the puppet as if I was performing over my head. And for me, again, I'm going to take it down to about right here for me. And that says 14 inches. Looks about right. Okay, there's about 14 and a half inches actually. So I'll mark the 14 and a half inches. But now looking at that, that's a little low. Okay, so I can't remember if I actually said this a minute ago or if I just thought about saying it. But I was gonna say you should always add probably like 2 or 3 inches to what you think, or more. Because another thing is too, if you have extra fabric, longer is better, especially when you're testing a pattern, okay? When you're testing a pattern, longer is better, because you can always trim it, okay? Then again, you can always sew more fabric on, but that's much more of a hassle and it's not as clean looking, okay? So I'm gonna add 3 inches to this, because it does, just looking at the pattern, this looks a little bit lower than I might normally have it. Actually, I'll add that. So I'll do it to about right here. That looks right. I'll save this right here. Now let me extend this pattern this way, making it perpendicular to that center line. Like this. Looking good. And let me continue this line down as well. Wow. That looks like it. That looks really good. I'm really, really happy with that. Okay. Actually, I am going to make this only half of a pattern, so I'm going to put this mirror line here. And I'll trim it. Okay. Just like that. So, again, I think that looks good. I'll cut this pattern out that my rotary cutters here. Here we go. Okay. Another little tip is you can actually iron this paper to help flatten it out. But I don't want to take up that time right now in the video. This should be fine. Carefully trim it out. Make sure you're cutting. You can cut either exactly on the line, or I like to, especially if this is going to be a fur pattern, I like to just give it that little bit of breath and cut to the outside of the line. For in between these fingers, though, you probably want to cut to the inside of the line, just to make sure you have that little flat edge at the bottom. There we go. Okay, this is really driving me nuts. Let me try to flatten it out a little bit. You know, and while it's coincidentally like this, if you want to like make like slightly longer fingertips, you can extend them like this to little points, or sometimes for fur, actually I like to have a flat tip because the ends of the fur create the points, and that way you get it a little bit cleaner looking like that. Okay, if you want to do that. But I don't want to do that, so I'm just going to trim it off. But that's an option. And again, I have a 5-finger pattern for a flat pattern for a live hand puppet in my sack puppet pattern that's available on my website. But you can kind of try to create your own if you want, or you can support the channel. Greatly appreciated. Even if you guys can't support the channel by buying a pattern or doing a donation for it, you know, even honestly, guys, just sharing these videos and stuff, and tagging me and things. I love seeing what you guys are doing. I'm blanking out on his name right now. I can't believe it because I talk to him all the time. One guy made a really, really cool interpretation of the shark pattern on my website. And it is so cool. It's got this like pirate look to it. I tweeted it out. It's one of my most recent tweets, I think 2 tweets ago. And it's, I think, also most recent, besides this live stream, on my Facebook page, Croot and Drew Puppets. If you look that up on Facebook. It is so cool. And I love his whole style that he has for all of his puppets that he makes. I would definitely check it out. So, this is the back sack. That's what we'll call it. The back sack. The back sack pattern. Boom. All one piece, which is really nice. Okay? But again, it would be mirrored on that edge for the back of the puppet. Now, for the next part, we want to do the front. So what I'm going to do, actually I can probably fit it on this half here? Oh, look at that. You'd think I planned it. Let me get rid of the scrap here. Okay. Now, gosh, I'm sorry for this paper noise. It's driving me nuts. There we go. That should be better. Less fighting. So now, I'm going to make the front of the pattern. Okay, this is the back. Now let's make the front of the sack. the front sack. There we go. Okay, so what I'm going to do is find that front neck piece, which is right here. If you remember this, let me just trim the extra on, because remember the starred part is the part that we want. So let me trim this down. And if you also remember, I only need up to the notches, because you can see this gets more narrow, which is not correct. So, you know, to be honest, that was kind of sloppy pattern making on my side. But I just guess I've been doing this so long, I know the way that I work, and I knew that I was only using up to this. Good practice would have been to actually probably drape the whole thing, but just to go further down straight. So let me cut that off so it doesn't confuse you, because this is all we need for the neck, okay? But before we start putting that neck on, I'm going to trace this back part too, but I'm going to trace it in pencil. I'm hoping you guys can see it. I'm not going to go over it with Sharpie yet because I don't want you to get confused between the lines we're going to keep and the lines we're not going to keep. So actually, let me try this blue pencil. I wonder if that'll show up a little better. So I'm going to line this up. Let me make sure this bottom is flat. Line this up against here. Oh, that's right. Good. Okay. I'm going to line this up at the very bottom. So this is all square, okay? Now what I'm going to do is trace this entire pattern. Am I? Let me make sure I'm doing this right. I might not be doing it right. Hold on. Do I want to do the neck first? That's what I want to do. Okay. So I'm sorry. Let me rephrase. I'm just going to trace this upper part of the neck to make sure I get this corner here. See that corner? That's very important. So now what I'm going to do is extend this line over this way. Like that, okay? So that I know this is the point where this gets connected. So essentially, this continues like this to make the side of the puppet, okay? So what I want to do now is take the center. This is the center line. So actually, let me mark the notches on the other side. This is the reverse. I hope this isn't too confusing. When it's done, it'll be crystal clear. Trust me. So, okay. So you'd think this is the mistake that I've made in the past, okay? That I have taken this to this edge and then traced the rest of the pattern. What happens is you have too much room here in the neck then. So what you actually have to do is move this line over, just like I did there, and line up the center front with the back front here of this one that we just traced. Okay? Now I scoot this all the way up till it hits that line. See how it hit that line? So that's where I need to start tracing this down. So I'm going to trace this down, straight down like this, and put those notches right where they were. Okay? See that? Oh, one thing I forgot to do is I forgot to do this part too. Okay, so I do that part. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is take this back pattern and line up these notches. Let me have these notches go straight through too. Line up these notches with those notches. Okay? And you know what? Something's not lining up here. I think I may have... Didn't line up? Okay, let me just make sure this lines up the way I want it to. Oh, I see. Yeah, it was just a little sloppiness on my side when I was draping it. So I want this to go straight through. I should have trued that up first. Okay, so that's my slight miscalculation. So yeah, if things are not lining up like that, just make sure you double check them, okay? So let me redraw that portion. It's a little flustered too from my troubles lining it up. So now I want to do it again. Have this. Let me erase this so it's not confusing. I'm sorry, guys. Someone's probably just watching this like, what's going on? Okay, there we go. So now I'm going to do that again. Sorry. So line this up on this side edge so it's flush. And then make sure this point goes up to that line because that's where this point connects to there. Okay? So I'm going to trace here, right in the center front of the neck to there. I'm going to come down this side, tracing down here. Add those notches. One there and one there. Now hopefully this should line up the way it should. Yes, perfect, just like that, okay? Gonna make sure this is flush on the side here, and the bottom, rather. Just line it there, line it up there, and good. And actually, now since I know this is correct, I'm just gonna go for it with the Sharpie. Because, yeah, that lines up there, perfect. Continue tracing down and around. Just like that. There we have it. And I'll just true this up. Okay. Transfer those notches. I'm going to line this up just to make sure I get a good line. So if you think of these as two separate pieces of fabric, this edge is going to be sewn to this edge. So let me transfer those notches here on this side and line them up here. And look at that. We have a really nice transition there. Okay? If yours comes to like a point here, that's not ideal. Okay? You really want this to be a real smooth line like this. And if you want to see what that kind of smooth line looks like, it's the neck pattern for that free pattern that we made before. If you look at that pattern, it's the same curve here. Okay? It comes up here. It kind of comes more straight down in the back because we wanted that bell look. But that's how it looks. Hope that makes sense. If you're familiar with those other patterns and videos, it should make sense. So let me start cutting this out. Cheat a little bit. Yeah. All right, so there we have the front of our sack puppet pattern and the back of our sack puppet pattern. And why don't we start making it? All right, we're going to dive right into it here. Here at Curtains of Puppets. So, For this character, like I said before, I'm thinking about making it into a dog-like character, but I think I'm going to specifically do a wolf. And I didn't want to do a wolf at first because I already have a really nice wolf puppet that I'm really happy with that I use all the time with our shows. But the honest reason why is because I have tons of extra gray fur. That's why we're doing that. And you can hear my dogs are excited about it too. So let me do this. Oh, one more thing I want to say too is depending on how wide your fur is. Okay, so actually, I will get the fur out and show you that. Because there's a couple things you can do. So here's the fur I'm using. Right now the nap is going sideways just because it's such a long piece here. Okay. But let me get the... Okay. So right now I have the nap going up. So, and actually a lot of monsters that I like to make, I actually like to have the nap going up. Most people probably have it go down, but I think it kind of naturally makes the monster look kind of a little bit more shaggy. Let me switch the camera here again. So imagine, let me do it flat first. So this is it with the nap down, okay? It looks very nice. It's flowing down. It can be, padded down really nice. Whereas if you have the nap going up, it kind of can naturally make it look a bit more crazy, a little bit more monstery, a little bit more, fluffy even, because it's naturally coming out. Now, over time, it might kind of settle down anyway, but that's something to keep in mind. So for a lot of monsters, I like to do that. However, for this wolf, I want it to be a little bit more tame, I think, so I'm going to have it go down. However, one thing I don't really recommend is having the nap go down for the fingers. Can you do it? Absolutely. It's your choice. But personally, I don't like to do that, okay? So if I'm doing monsters, I have the nap. Excuse that something else was drawn on this before. I changed my mind about that clearly. So right now I have my nap going up, okay? So what I would do is trace the pattern out like this for a monster and be done with it. All one piece. I would mirror it right on one piece. So it's all, so the whole body and arms and everything is two pieces, a front and a back. Because I'm just mirroring it on that center seam, okay? However, with a character like this wolf I want to make, I want to have the nap of the fur going up on the hands and down on the body, okay? So what I'm going to actually do is make this a separate piece. Now, what I highly recommend, now I've seen people, you can really willy-nilly just cut it anywhere, okay? But best practice is to have, a right angle in there. So let me do that for you, okay? So best practice is to do a right angle. Some people might think you want a certain amount of inches from the side. That's not a bad idea either. But you see here, so this is about here would be exactly 7 inches, which is actually about where I coincidentally need it anyway. But really, depending on how wide yours is, I would make it wherever it's a right angle. So if I just take this ruler, I'm going to line it up so it is right at that edge. Make sure it's square down here. And find out about where it is at a right angle. And I'd say it's right about there. Okay? So boom. That's where I'm going to cut it. Now, before you cut it, though, definitely make some registration marks before you cut it. That way they're like perfect. And then now I will cut it. And I'll know for this wolf pattern that I want the nap going down on this piece and up on this piece. Okay? Just like that. Now I can transfer this information to this. Okay? So what I'll do is, actually I'll just line this up right here, because these hands are completely identical because I traced it one hand with the other. I'll actually trace this line here and even add the exact same registration marks. You'll see why in a moment. Extend them just like that. And now again, for 99% of my puppets, I leave this all as one piece. But in this case, I want to change the direction of the net for the different pieces, so I'm making it separate pieces. Just like that. So now these pieces might look kind of familiar. Let me try to flatten them out a little bit again. Starting to curl a bit. And again, on this piece, I'll put the down arrow again. I want the nap going down, down, down. And it's going to be up, up, up. Okay? Now, if you make your pattern into 4 pieces like this, believe it or not, you don't actually need 4 pieces. Because these hands are 100% identical. So rather than, cut one in the fold, cut one in the fold, cut two, it'd be cut one in the fold, cut one in the fold, cut 4. That's all you do. So I'm actually going to get rid of this pattern. I don't need it because this will be attached to here. Again, the registration marks are on the other side. You want to transfer them when you do it. This lines up with this perfectly, and it lines up with this perfectly, which means that these center lines match up with these notches perfectly here as well. Okay, so it all lines up absolutely perfectly. I think I have my notcher. Do I have it? Let me see if I can. If I don't find it the next second, I'm not going to use it. Can't find it. Okay, so I have a special tool for notching patterns. Clearly, I have misplaced it. So I'm just going to transfer these notches. I highly recommend getting the notcher, though, because it just... oh, there it is. I see it. There it is. Having the notcher makes it so much nicer because, one notch can be seen clearly from both ends, from both sides, because it's an actual hole. And it being a hole actually is beneficial because when you're tracing, you can trace inside those holes. So it kind of makes the whole thing a lot more precise. So I've got those notches there. And let's do a notch up here too. And there. Great. Smash them. Okay. So I'm going to focus on the bodies first. I'm going to do the front first because it just feels right. Okay. So I've got the nap going down. Did I do it right? Yeah, it's going down. Okay. I'll make it as far over to the salvage edge as I can. Hold on a second. Just keep hanging in here. Sorry, so a really big piece of fur. It's kind of hard to wrestle. I feel like I'm wrestling a wolf. Okay. Put it in my lap so it doesn't keep dragging down. There we go. Okay, so I want to get it as far over as I can to save on my fur. So let me trace this way. And again, the fur is going down. Good. So, watch, I'll give you some more little tips as I go here. I'm going to get it as far up as I can without getting too close to the top. Lay your fur as flat as you can. Sorry, I'm wrestling this a little more than I normally do because I'm trying to keep it all in camera. This is not, these videos are unfortunately can't be exactly how I work just because people would get more mad if things weren't on frame, I think. So, just like that. And sometimes I like to put things on it as well, kind of weight it down in certain spots, whatever it is. And they actually sell weights and stuff for doing that. But I happen to have a bunch of eyes around me, so I'm going to use those to kind of hold it down. So, I'm going to trace along the bottom, the side here, while marking those notches. Up along this side, going into that notch. There's a little wrinkle there, flatten that out. Come down to here. Now, I'm not going to draw a line all the way down this side because I'm not going to cut on that line. And also, well, I'm just not going to cut on that line. So I'm just going to instead treat it like a notch at the top and a notch at the bottom so I know exactly where I want to mirror it. So watch this. So I flip this over like that and line up those front notches there, then I can do that. Now, if you do draw that line, is there anything wrong with it? No. And I've done it many times. And the fact that I've done it many times is the reason why I don't like doing it. Because then I just have a big Sharpie line in the middle of the inside of my puppet. And it's just like, well, why is that there? It just feels sloppy to me. So let me do this. Oops, make sure this is lined up. There we go. Okay, there we go. There is my front. And actually, I'm gonna cut out these pieces as I go. Usually, I trace them all first and then cut them all out at once. But I think it'll be a little bit more interesting to watch. Oh, now when you cut it now, if you're gonna sew the entire thing by hand, cut right on the line. If you're going to machine stitch, you're gonna want to add at least probably 1/4 of an inch, at most probably 1/2 an inch, depending on your sewing style and what you're used to. I'm used to doing about 1/4 of an inch, so I'm going to do that because I'm going to machine stitch this body. Mostly for your home viewing experience. Because if I had to hand sew this entire thing, you guys would be pretty bored. But I don't need to leave it at the bottom. But you can if you want. If you want to like hem it, or if you do actually want to do a full lining for the whole thing, which I've actually never done a complete full lining for these, because I just don't feel like it's usually really necessary, and it just keeps the puppet lighter. Only time I'll put like a half lining in is when I put hooping in a puppet. Then you do need to do a partial lining at least. And again, there's an entire video on the hooping and that part of the lining on my channel. Just type in how to make hooping for your sack puppet, or sack puppet hooping, or whatever. Again, it's linked down in the description. Just like that. Boom. There's a piece. Okay, I'm going to put that to the side. So that was the front. I'm going to get that out of my reach so I don't accidentally. That's the worst, when you accidentally trace the wrong thing twice. No fun. Okay, let me just check this piece now. These pieces are getting really goofy. Like I said, I have a big piece of fur here. Kind of goofy to manage. So, okay, I can see the grain direction going straight down, and that's what I want to line up my center back with. Of this. This is the back of the puppet. Okay, I'm going to get it as close to that piece as I can to help save on fur. Get it as high as I can. And that's what I'll do. So, let me start tracing this. I didn't know those notches. I did good. Okay, there we go. Flip it over, line up that bottom notch with that top notch, and trace again. There we go. Now, where did I put that blade? Someone in the video probably saw where I put it and is kindly pointing at it for me. Whatever. I'll use this one. Showing diversity of tools you can use. You can use a box cutter too. Though those Persona blades are super nice, and I highly recommend them, especially for cutting foam. Yeah, I'm leaving that 1/2 inch. Or I'm sorry, I'm leaving a 1/4 inch personally. But you can do whatever you need to do. All right, there we have it. We have our back of the body that goes like this, our front of the body that will go like this, and that'll all attach. Okay. I got fur in my mouth. Okay, before I go on, I'm going to start tracing my hand pattern. Okay? Now, I want the nap to be going in the opposite direction, so let me double check that. I'm trying to use this piece here. So now I have my nap flowing down, and I want it to point like this. Okay. So again, this is what's nice about having it flat up against an edge. You can get you can really kind of save on your fur that way. Okay. So now this, trace here. Just like that. Now what you want to do is, you could trace this again, But I like to flip each time I trace it, so that way it's good to have a consistent habit. Then you don't accidentally make a mistake. Because the worst thing you can do is trace and cut out 4 of them in one way, and then you cut it out, and that's all the fur you have, and then you realize, oh my gosh, I have, you know, two left hands I just cut out, and now you have to order more fur in order to finish that puppet. Stinks. You don't want it to happen. Okay. So I'll trace this one here. And if you're wondering, have you ever done that, Adam? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. And the point that where you usually realize it is the second you cut out the last one. That's when you always realize it. I would normally use a little bit more time and precision in tracing this, but again, trying to expedite it a little bit to respect your guys' time. That's what I do for you guys. Alrighty. Trace this one again here. Okay, one more. Flip it over. There's my cap. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to cut all these out, and actually I see my new Persona blades. Bing. Okay. I have a link to these on my website. If you go to adamkrutinger.com and click on supplies, there I have linked not just these, but pretty much supplies of everything that I use, from my foam to my fleece to my fur. Everything is kind of linked there. And you want to constantly check it too, because whenever I find new products that I'm using, I try to update it. And if I forget to update something, send me, go to the Krutinger Puppets tutorial Q&A and post it there, and ask me to add it there so that I can, update the resources for you guys. Sometimes I forget. So let me talk about this quick. So I'm leaving that 1/4 inch for myself for the seam allowance, but one thing that you really don't want to have machine stitched is the fingers. Okay, you don't want to machine stitch those fingers together, just because a couple of reasons. First of all, with the nap of the fur, it's just so goofy to stitch around those. And secondly, think about how the way fingers move with a puppet. They get a lot of stress, a lot of bending. They're the most, usually if something's going to wear out on a puppet, it's those fingers, the fur falling out or something, from touching things, from grabbing things, from gesturing. So you really want this to be as strong as possible, okay? There's a lot of tension on it from your fingers. Whereas this part that just hangs, there's really no tension to it. There's no weight put on it. That's why for a sack puppet, the main things that are important to hand stitch are the fingers as well as the top neck seam. that's what you want to hand stitch. So once I get to about here, okay, I'm just going to get a little closer. I'm going to kind of go in a little bit there and then start to go exactly on that line, just like this. So that's going to be the only real tedious part of today is hand stitching the hands, the fingers. But I will try to focus on that as fast as I can, and maybe I can figure out, see if you guys had some questions as well. Unfortunately, I don't. Last time I had the live comments up while I was working, but I unfortunately am using a different encoder this time, which is why I had a slight delay. I've been having a lot of trouble with my computer lately, and I really need to try to save up money to get a new one. It's just a little bit outdated. I got it in 2011, but it was like high end when I got it, so it's still okay for now, but it's kind of getting toward the end of its life. But since we've got a baby on the way, I'm prioritizing my funds, unfortunately. So I gotta find a way to get a computer. So if you want to sponsor this video or any other videos on this channel and get me a computer, oh wow, would we be friends or what? Okay. Now let me see, get up here. There we go. You see that? Okay. Man, these blades here just cut like absolute butter. Okay, so there's two sides of the hands, front and back. I went a little close to the salvage edge, probably a little closer than I should have gone. Because sometimes that fur right up to the salvage edge can be a little goofy, but actually, you know what? Looks like I'm okay. If I was over just a little bit more, I may have been in trouble. Okay, so cutting it out like this. All right, one more piece to cut out, and that's all the cutting for the body, for the sack puppet body. Oops. Okay. Got a little close to that line there, but that's okay. I can make up for it in sewing. There we go. Now here are all of my pieces. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start going ahead and stitching it together. Let me grab some thread. Now you can use, ideally you'd use gray thread, but this is, pretty dark fur with the gray, so I'm just going to use black. And also, if you really sew correctly, you'll never see your stitches anyway from the outside. So it doesn't make a huge difference, but definitely best practice to use the same color. But also, this will kind of give you a little bit of contrast so you can see in the video. And also, it's neutral. Kind of keeps neutral colors there. So, oh boy, now where did my needle go? Grab a new needle. Okay. So, actually, I'll try using a really big needle so you can hopefully see a little better now that you need to see every single stitch. Okay. If you need any advice with the hand stitching, I have a whole video on hand stitching on my channel. It's I think it's called Best Stitch for Sewing a Puppet, or Best Puppet Stitches. If you type that in to YouTube, you should come across the video. And it's not linked down below yet, but I will link it right after this video. And let's see. So, I'll give you some more little tips on this hand sewing as I go as well. So make sure you line these up the right way. So that one will go there. Okay. And now I'll put some pins in. Now pinning this is a little goofy because there's all that fur there. It's hard to make sure it's lined up. So I'm making sure that like the pit of this thumb is lined up. And I'll put a pin through that. Just like that to kind of hold it. I'll do the same thing with the pinky, so at least the front and back are lined up. Good. And now I'll do one for each finger toward the tip. Make sure they're lined up at the front. Just like that. Now some little tips for extra for hand sewing is you don't want to make your thread too long. This may or may not be long enough to go around all the fingers. I'm not quite sure offhand. But the thing is, you don't want it longer than one stroke of your arm like this. Okay? Because otherwise you're going like this, and like this, and like this, and the thread just gets tangled. And actually, this might be a little bit long for me, but I'm just going to go for it. So, I'm going to start kind of knotting it here. I talk about how I knot it in that video as well. But you don't want to actually tie a knot in it, because knots can wreck your fabric by tearing through, and they can just pull through, loosening your stitches. So what you want to do is go in the same spot, loosely, 3 times. 1, 2, 3. That's kind of loose. And then just give it a little tug. And that will never come out. That's how tailors start their stitching, typically, and professional sewers. So that's what I'm going to do here. So now I'm going to kind of tuck in these fur fibers as I go, just catching both ends. And the stitch that I'm using is a whip stitch. It's, the strongest stitch you can do for this, really. I know some people like to do like a baseball stitch, which isn't bad either. But the thing about again, I explained this a little bit more in detail in my other video. But the thing about a whip stitch, and why it's so strong, is because it's wrapping around this like a spiral. Okay? And the reason that makes it stronger is because it has that little bit of give. And you take a little bit of give, that may sound weaker. Okay? But just think about it. Like, even think about the difference between glass and plexiglass. Glass is technically stronger. It's a harder, substance than plastic, acrylic, which is the clear plastic for some windows. So glass is much stronger, but that much strength also makes it brittle. So that's why, different things and different techniques are better for certain things. So if you were doing like a ladder stitch or a slip stitch for this, I mean, that is probably the weakest stitch you could possibly do for this. Could you put a puppet together that way, though? Absolutely. Will it work? Sure. Will it last as long? No, there's no way. It may still last a very long time, but proportionally to the use. Sorry, I got a fur fuzz on my face, and it's driving me nuts. I can't even get it. I should have shaved. It's like sticking to the Velcro of my face. I'm sure many of you can feel my pain. You've been there before. Jeez, it's right. I keep breathing in another piece. Oh gosh, I should have brought some water. It's the first time I didn't have water for myself. I'm getting kind of dehydrated. Okay, so you're probably staring at this video, just thinking, oh my gosh, it's been like 3 minutes, and he's halfway around one thumb. And that's a theory to why some people think most puppets, I should say, most puppets only have 4 fingers to cut down on sewing time. Good theory. I don't think that's the reason why, but it is an advantage to it, making it a little bit less work. The reason I think is that I think it actually just looks more natural for a puppet. It's the same for cartoons. You'll find that most cartoons only have 4 fingers. And if you draw a cartoon hand with 5 fingers, or if you look it up, you can Google it, like a cartoon, like a Mickey Mouse type hand with 5 fingers, it looks really strange. And it looks like there's too many fingers. Not just because, you might think, oh, that's because you're used to it. And if you kind of get that idea out of your head and just stare at it, it does just look strange. It just looks too wide. It just looks strange. And they found that 4 fingers looks better. But actually, no, I think I might be technically wrong from that. For animation standpoint, I think I remember seeing a documentary that they started off doing a less finger to save time on drawing, which is kind of the same argument for, building a puppet. But I still think it looks better. So I totally just contradicted myself and backed up, but that's okay. Yeah, so they do 1 less finger on animation to save time. All those fingers add up. So especially when you get into this part, I don't know what you'd call that, the in part of between your knuckles, you especially want to make sure you're doing really tight stitches there. And again, tight stitches doesn't mean pulled tightly. It means close together, okay? That's a part where things can kind of, where there's the most tension, potentially. I'd say there's the least tension as far as this part of the puppet, the least tension probably in the fingertip. Depending on what you're doing, really, I guess. But I think for general use, it's probably the least tension. You can see I'm kind of tucking in those fibers as I go. I'm actually making pretty decent time as I'm all the way around one thumb and halfway up one finger. So this will be finished in no time. So again, this is where it's kind of strange for a live video because I'm not even used to, doing this kind of work in absolute silence like this. I'm usually listening to a podcast Yeah, actually, always listening to a podcast when I do this. And if you want to find a podcast to listen to while you're making puppets, what better to listen to than Puppeteers Podcast? Okay. We release our episodes bi-weekly, every other week. Our last episode was with the one and only famous John Little, puppet builder extraordinaire, and all around super, super nice guy. Super nice guy. We got into it on a couple topics, which is fun. We talked a lot about how to sell a puppet and stuff, and actually I want to do a separate video with him on that as well. That won't technically be a podcast, but I want to get even deeper into it because I think we just really scratched the surface of that, and I want to get more into it, especially on the topic of, so not just selling puppets, because the hard thing is to selling puppets is if you want to actually make money doing this, you're not usually selling to puppeteers. Will you ever sell to puppeteers? Sure. Does a puppeteer know the value of a puppet? Hopefully. If it's a puppeteer that's worth their salt, they'll understand the value of a puppet and why it's expensive. But what I really wanted to get into with John that I thought of after is educating your clients, because a lot of times you'll be working with a producer or someone from a theater company, or someone that owns a store and wants a mascot in a commercial, and they'll call you and say, "Hey, I've only got how much for, I've got $100. Can you make us a puppet?" And so many puppet builders I know, they see that budget and they're just like, no, or they just or might not even respond. Okay, and what I'll say is, you first of all, you can kind of feel it out by the way they type it, but I would say always respond within reason, depending on I get a lot of messages from weird people on YouTube. I'm sorry if you're one of them that asking me for a puppet. I try to respond to as much as I can, but sometimes I get a lot of stuff that I just can't do everything. Got a lot going on. But where was I? But it's about educating your client as well, and not just saying, "Oh, they're actually expensive," because I think a lot of times it kind of comes off as pompous, like you're almost excited. Some people, it feels like some people are almost excited to tell them how expensive it is or how way off that they are. And I always try to find the most gentle way of doing that and kind of walking them through it. And another whole factor that we didn't talk about that I think would be really interesting to talk about is we talked a little bit about whether it's hourly or this or that. Now, I rarely actually put it down as an hourly rate in my invoices. It's just actually the only time I actually do that is if the company says like, "Hey, you know what? For a bookkeeper, even if it's not technically how you do it, just divide it into some sort of hours because that's how we need it for our bucks." That's the only time I do it. But generally, I don't do that because on one side, how can I say this? It's like, well, definitely your time is valuable, but also it's like the faster you do something, depending on your building skills, of course, depending on your building skills. If I spend less time doing something, does that make it more valuable or less valuable? Some people might think it's less valuable because you're putting less time into it, right? You're putting less hours into it. If I was working at McDonald's and I worked 4 hours, I would get 4 hours of pay. I wouldn't get 8 hours of pay, right? Whereas when you're in this kind of an industry, though, part of why you can do things faster is because you're a professional. Now think about it. That's why movies use like big name actors. That's part of the reason why. Not even necessarily big name actors, but professional actors versus just anyone on the street. Because if they use just a random guy on the street that looks the part, and they think they can get the performance out of him, they probably can. But guess what? It may take 10, 15, 20 takes to do it, which is a lot of time if you have a whole camera crew. But if they get a professional that can do it in one take or two takes, they save a ton of money. Again, they might be spending more money up front on on the actor, but they save money because they're paying. They're not having to pay extra hours for the guy behind the camera, not having to pay extra hours of the editor who's sifting through all that footage and finding the best take. It just saves everyone's time. So by paying a little bit more for the actor, you're saving so much on the back end of everyone else's time. Okay, so it's the same kind of thing in puppets. Like for example, well, it's not exactly the same, but similar in that. Let's say you have a deadline, right? Okay. Let's just say this puppet's going to take a month to build, but you need it in 2 weeks. Then it's essentially like a rush order. And can I even do it? I'm going to have to sacrifice other things to do that. And luckily, I can already work that fast just because of my experience and stuff like that. So those are all factors to put in when you're trying to price a puppet. And another thing is too, this is kind of a little pet peeve of mine. Sorry if it comes off a little, I don't know, but a lot of people that I shouldn't say a lot of people. I should just say, I've seen sometimes people say, have sewn by hand as being like a selling point, And to me, as someone who sews and builds things, it's almost a red flag. It's like, so it's a big debate amongst puppet builders, and I know so many puppet builders that say hand sewn is the best. If it's not hand sewn, it's not it's not high quality or it's not this or that, and that's not quite true. What it depends on is how good is your hand sewing. Okay, there are some people who sewn by hand might not be as good as a machine stitch. Maybe it's not even enough because your sewing has to be even. Each stitch should be like the same. And a machine, for the most part, will do that perfectly. And if you're not that experienced, it's not an asset, okay? And also, good machine sewing is equally strong. Look at the clothes you are wearing on your body now, okay? Right now, look down at your shirt. It's machine stitched, the whole thing. And guess what? You went on your whole day and the sleeve didn't fall off, okay? Your pants are still in one piece, hopefully. And machine stitching, and that's also a caveat too, because you have to know how to use a sewing machine as well. Now, that's one thing I have gotten a lot of comments on from people saying, hey, can you do a video on, machine stitching? I almost feel like it's not even fair to, because it's so dependent on your sewing machine. And the last thing I want are those kind of comments like, oh, well, my knob's not on that side. What do I do? I can't answer those kinds of questions. It's so dependent on your actual sewing machine, and they all have different settings and take different needles and stuff like that. So I can't really, rather I should say I don't plan on necessarily ever doing one. But maybe it would be, actually, you know what? Maybe if I just kind of say that kind of stuff in the video and really establish, hey, this is my machine, yours may be different. If you have a different machine, I can't really help you. But just kind of show my process. Maybe I will do that one day. You should let me know in the comments if that's something you think you want to see. But another thing is, too, again, my machines. I'm very fortunate that I invested years ago while I was in my knee-deep in my costume building career, that I invested in not just high quality machines, but literally fully industrial machines. So, like, my sewing machine, like, literally weighs like 700 pounds. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's like, maybe it's like 500 or 600 pounds. It's very, very heavy. I cannot lift it myself. And I have 4 industrial machines. 2 straight stitch machines, 1 walking foot machine, and a serger, industrial serger. Because that's the thing, people use, oh, what stitch you use? Industrial machines only do 1 stitch, They do, a lot of, like think about any company, any factory. They have, like, for building Coca-Cola bottles, You know, they have one that makes the bottle. They have one that's a separate machine that fills the bottle. They have a separate machine that attaches the caps. So, yeah, like industrial professional machines usually do one thing, but they do it very well. They do it perfectly. So, if you can invest in a straight stitch machine, you will never regret it. You will never regret it. A straight stitch industrial machine. My favorite brand is Juki for my sewing machines. However, my first straight stitch sewing machine was the brand Brother. It was a Brother industrial machine called Etc. The Brother Etc. I can't see which brand, which number, which model my Juki is. The Brother Etc. is actually a nicer machine than the Juki one that I have, but I got these secondhand, and my Juki's in better condition than I got my Brother Etc. in. I think I need to fix the motor on my Brother Etc. just because it's like literally probably, how old is that machine? Jeez. It's got to be like 50 years old. Probably actually older. Okay. Coming around the pinky here. I should try to take some comments now. Let me see if I can. I just don't want to get away from the stitching. Probably actually older. Oops. Do I see any comments here? Not really seeing any questions. I'm sorry if you posted questions earlier. I can't really scroll back through them now because it'll take my hands off of what I'm doing, and I'm trying to make this go by fast for you guys. So if you have any questions, put them now. Okay. Bella Larson is asking me, how long does each puppet take you? Okay. I'm going to give you two answers for that. The first one is it's impossible to tell you how long a puppet's going to take because every single puppet you make is unique and has different challenges. That's whether it's a sculpted head, whether it's I'm making a new pattern for it because it's an unusual shape, or whether it's a pattern that I already have. Now, I'll say on general for a hand puppet like this, usually when I talk to people, I say for me a puppet's going to take 40, somewhere between 40 and 60 hours, depending on the design, for puppets that I do the most, that you're most familiar with seeing on my channel. So that's generally how long they take. But again, I don't always price it hourly like that. We talked a lot about that in our last podcast episode with John Little. And actually, we released my dummy invoice. Now, dummy is in like a mock-up of my invoice that I use with a couple examples of some characters priced out. So if you want to see that, that is on our Patreon though. So you have to be a member of our Patreon in order to view that. But it's $1. So at minimum, unless you want to support it at a higher level, which we would appreciate. But it is through the podcast. So it would be $1 to be able to access that. Okay, this next question is from Jordan. He says, "Can you please build? Can you please build a live hand blinking owl next time? Okay, I'm really glad you mentioned that because it kind of brings up something that I want to talk about with my channel that really, I was talking about with my buddy, Chaz Vance, who's like a brilliant builder. You should check out his YouTube channel and his page, Technically Magic, on Facebook. Amazing artist. He was on the Jim Henson Creature Shop Challenge show. That's actually where we met in the audition process for that. And he said, he hates how-to videos because he thinks it's all backward. It shouldn't be how-to. It should be, and actually, I think we talked about this in the podcast with John. It shouldn't be how-to. It should really be, here's one way. Here's one way to make a puppet. Here's one way to do this. Really, I hope you guys don't always, copy these videos and puppets they build verbatim. I hope you put your own little twists and changes into them to make them unique to you. Okay, so if you wanted to make a live hand blinking owl, you can use this video as guidance for the body, and you can use the previous live stream as a guidance toward making a beak, because a muzzle is very similar to a beak, although I do want to do a future video specifically on the beak. But if you think about how the shape protrudes out, just carve that into a more triangular shape. Then you have a beak. And add the blinking eye. I have a whole video on my channel for how to make a blinking eye. So you just have to kind of retrofit that to what you're doing. So if you take each of these building videos that I do as more of a philosophy on how to do a technique, you will find a lot more freedom in your puppet building, and you'll surprise yourself with what you can do. You'll surprise yourself. Though I do have plans to make a bird. I want to do a bird puppet. There's actually 2 bird puppets I want to do. I want to do a traditional puppet like this that's a bird, but that's not going to be too soon. And I want to do a small mech puppet that is a bird. And that's going to be hopefully sooner than the other one. So there is one hand completely stitched. One down, one to go. Oh, great. Where's the other hand? Okay. Those are stitched. That's stitched. Did it fall? There we go. Okay, I'm going to look back up at the questions after I pin this. So I can just mindlessly start stitching again. Oh, actually, I see a quick puppet there. Oh, is there a computer method for making patterns? I'm sure. Oh, yes, there is. Okay, so I'm going to answer that in a couple different ways, depending. I'm not quite sure how specific you're trying to be. There is a computer program that people use for pattern making that's technically for making. Have you ever seen like paper sculptures that you make by folding them? And I don't mean origami. I mean like it's called pepicora. Okay, if you type that in, I don't know how it's spelled. You have to Google it. If you type in pepicora, you'll find flat patterns that are used to make shapes. You can make like a dome. And there's peppercorn files for all kinds of things. That's actually how I did an Iron Man helmet that you may have seen in the background. It's in my classroom now for using peppercorn files. That's a computer way of creating patterns. Now currently a lot of those are very angular because they're meant for paper, and paper can't do compound curves like foam can. So that's a program that people use. Though I think, I haven't looked into it in a while, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's like a foam setting now where you can change it to have less darts because of being able to do compound curves with foam. So look into that. Now, if you actually mean like digitizing a pattern that you make, like taking this pattern, what I do is I take a pattern like this, and then you can scan it on your computer. Sometimes I take a picture of it with a reference for scale in there. And then I will just digitally trace it. And for that, some people like to use Photoshop. but I like to make it all vector-based. So I like to use Adobe Illustrator for that. But there's other free programs I'm sure that you can use. Okay, let me knot this and then I'll take another question. I saw another one in there that I wanted to answer. Okay. Nope, I see a lot of people that put in the Pepicora spelling in there for me. But actually, I see a couple different spellings. I think Jeff has it right, but I could be wrong. Okay, I see another question. Did you ever get into foam carving? We kind of did in the last video, where we built it up to build the muzzle. So that was a little bit of foam carving. That's probably not what you're talking about. You're probably talking more like, thinking like like a puppet, like Miss Piggy, how she's completely carved. And she's actually carved and cast, but there has been a carved version of her too. But Statler and Waldorf, that's better. Like those are puppets that are carved foam with scissors. I don't tend to do that too much. If I do, it'll just be a feature, like a nose or something, because I really like to make my puppets with patterns. So if someone sees a pattern or a shape, that I can just pull out that pattern and do it again real quick, rather than having to fully sculpt something again. It's like starting completely new every single time. So I don't tend to. Do I think 3D printed puppets will be the future instead of foam patterning? I don't think so. I don't think for as far as the shape of the head, because it's so light and durable and forgiving as far as being soft. Unless there's someday 3D printed foam, which there probably is, and I'm not aware of it. That could be a thing. But I think it has been and is becoming more popular with different mechanical parts of puppets, as well as maybe the internal, I don't want to say skull, but the base that the mechs are built off of, that platform, can be 3D printed. And I actually 3D print my slide triggers. I talk about that in my eye blink video, which I think some people don't even realize, but I bet you some people only half watch that eye blink video. If you watch that all the way through, only the first half of it is the building of the eye blink mechanism. The rest of it is kind of talking about different mechanisms, and I take out a couple puppets that I have with different mechanisms, and kind of demonstrate them and show the triggers and give other recommendations of books and stuff like that. So if you didn't watch the end part of that, I would definitely check that out. Oh, John Little's here. John Little, we were just talking about you. I'm not sure if you caught that. Sorry, I'm just peeking up at the comments sometimes. John Little asked if I have any other hobbies. No. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, I like to think that throughout my life, hobbies was my hobby. I always had a hobby. Whether it was, I remember collecting keychains when I was little, which doesn't sound like a hobby, a collection. It's a collection, but somehow I made that into a hobby. The way I was always on the hunt for it. Luckily, that phase didn't last very long. But yeah, I was always interested in the arts in some way, but not typically, usually fine arts. Though I did do some fine art. I did some painting classes and stuff. I always just liked making things. I always just liked making things, and I started doing some theater in high school when I. Soon after I met my wife, well, of course we weren't married at the time, we were 14, but through doing theater, and actually if you listen to a podcast that I was on, not Puppeteer's podcast, but it's called One New Person. Actually, my buddy Brian Miller runs that podcast, and I was on it a couple of months ago, and I kind of talk about my whole story and upbringing and what got me into puppetry and what made me kind of who I am today. I'm actually going to be going on another podcast soon, which I don't know if I'm allowed to announce it yet, but I think we're recording tomorrow actually. But I'm not sure what the release date is or if they want to do an actual thing. So, but keep on the lookout. I'm going to be on another podcast too soon, and it'll be a little different than the one I did with Brian too. But definitely check out the one I did with Brian. That's One New Person. Is his podcast. I'll put a link to that in my description of this video later too. Some people are asking about other companies and things that they use. I'm not, I don't know what other companies use. I can just guess by looking at things. Most people doing these kind of puppets tend to use very similar coverings, whether it's fleece or fur. The most variation I tend to see is in the different foams people use, but those tend to be pretty similar too sometimes. Does your wife make puppets or costumes? She doesn't. She does do puppetry with us occasionally, though. A lot of our live shows, she doesn't really have an interest or desire or patience to to really do film puppetry. At least with projects that we've worked on. Though she has been a hand, literally, in some projects when we really need something. But she likes doing live shows the most because she's an actress, amazing singer, super talented, and she's why I'm doing this now. She made me what I am now today, for better or for worse. Just kidding. Okay. Oh, jeez. Someone says, I heard you're a teacher. How do you respond? No, how do your students respond when they find out about your puppetry? Well, they find out pretty quick because I tend to use puppets in school a lot. With our morning announcements, I often have my main character Arlo on there introducing things. We just had a guest author at our school, Troy Cummings, which, oh my gosh, he's so amazing. You should check out his stuff. I've been encouraging him to try to do YouTube videos of his illustration process and stuff. And I did a nice little interview with him with the puppet and some drawing demonstrations with Arlo. And I'm excited to release those over the next little bit. Arlo's got his own channel. That's really just a side thing that I do for school. But other people seem to be enjoying it sometimes too. That's the Arlo Show, which is a little blue monkey. But if you Google that, you'll probably find a blue monster puppet that does video games. I actually built that puppet too. And it's a complete coincidence that both of our puppets have the same name. Complete coincidence. A crazy coincidence, but a coincidence nonetheless. All right, we're making some good time. After these fingers are done, you're going to be amazed by how fast it starts to come together. Because I'm going to stitch the rest on the machine. And then I'm just going to pin it to this head since this head isn't covered. We'll do that in the next video. And then, I'll attach the neck to the head. And then we'll do some trimming and facial features next video. And then this will all be done. It'll be a nice little... I'm probably going to have to give this to Zach. Oh, gosh. That's Zach Homiser. He's a good friend of mine. You've seen his work if you've watched many videos on this channel. He was my co-host for the episode with Barnaby Dixon, which if you've not seen that podcast, you got to check that out. Barnaby Dixon is amazing. Oh, Omar, yes, thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, he said, "Where did you get your magic skills?" Referring to the magician puppet. Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay, so let me go back a little bit on that. Before I ever did puppetry, I was a magician. I started doing magic in high school, and actually all through college, and actually through high school and college for about 10 years, it was my only income, is being a professional local magician. I worked in like 5 different restaurants over the years, doing magic shows a couple nights a week, strolling magic, close-up magic, and then I also did a lot of. I loved my favorite thing to do is school assembly magic shows. That was my favorite thing to do. But I'd also do tons and tons, hundreds and hundreds of magic shows for birthdays and things like that. Um, yeah, so I have um, been doing magic forever. I do it less now. I still do it once in a while. I did a magic show like maybe 3 weeks ago for a friend and family for their kid's birthday, which was fun. But really, once I started teaching, it kind of ate up a lot of the time, a lot of my business. Because, like I said, my favorite shows and the most shows I did really was school assembly shows. But since I work at a school during the day, I'm not available during school time shows. So I like to do them for my own school too. I like to do, uh, especially like the field day assembly for kindergarten, things like that. Love it. And I've been actually I don't know if you follow my Instagram at all. Every once in a while, I post like a little magic thing. I have I've posted like 3 or 4 since January of little card trick things or little flourishes because I do love handling a deck of cards. Oh, and then you asked about the magician puppet. So when we do our live puppet shows, I mentioned that my wife is a part of, and my good buddy Zach is a part of. One of the main things we did was a puppet magic show. Since I had this, big background in doing live stage shows of magic, when I did puppetry, it was like, you know what? It's kind of like free content. So I kind of did. I picked a couple tricks that I could do with my puppet and I adapted it to do with the puppet. And then we did our puppet show where it was my magician puppet Felix, who was right there. I don't know if you could see him hanging there. And his lovely assistant Binky Bunny, that white bunny Binky. That's what Zach did. And then Maria was a couple things. She was for the magic portion of the show. She was Felix's right hand. And we usually would do an intro too with other characters. We'd all use different characters. The Nimmels, we called our puppet troupe the Nimmels, and we do our opening theme song that we had custom. That Zach actually wrote the lyrics to, and then my buddy Bill um, composed the music for. And we do a nice little intro. Sometimes we do themes about kindness, or I hate the phrase of it, but anti-bullying themes. And just to clarify that, the reason why I don't like that, I don't like the word bully at all, because it's, even if there's bully-like behavior, that's labeling the kids. And I think rather than promoting anti-bully, it's just to promote kindness. It's kind of just the same thing, and it just has a more positive connotation all around. So if you have a program that you do for kids, I highly recommend doing that, because I think that whole labeling others people and is part of the problem. But anyway, wow, that got weird. That topic. Is it about Is it about to end? Oh gosh. Yes, it's going to end very soon. I just got to get around this thumb, stitch up the sides, and then we're done. We're getting really close here. So I can only get a few more questions. Someone says they love my banana puppets. Thank you. I made the banana puppets for Arlo's art show that he was doing in college. I actually have a lot of, on my Instagram, a lot of behind the scenes pictures of the building process for those. Those are all 3 mechanical banana puppets. And each mouth is a different mechanism, the way that it moves to kind of give them different characteristics. So you can, again, check that out. It's probably a little deeper into my Instagram, but yeah, I've got a lot of behind the scenes things on my Instagram that were not on other things. Someone said, "Can I make a live hand monster puppet?" Sure can. Sure can. Actually, if you follow my first video series with that green guy with the orange hair, if you use that same pattern, but just use fur instead of fleece, straight through, there you have it, a live hand monster. Or even, I have another whole series on my channel that is on how to build a monster puppet. Though that pattern has rotted arms. So what I would do is just build that whole puppet verbatim, except for the arms, and then just do the live hand video from the other series with fur and attach it the same way. So kind of like how I was talking before about using these videos as more of a philosophy or theory of puppet building and mix matching things and just trying different things in general, I think will be the most, even just more fun for you guys, especially if you kind of like. And another thing I'm just going to point out too, if you do follow the videos verbatim and like exactly stitch for stitch, there's nothing wrong with that either. Because one thing that I tend to do whenever I learn something new is copy it verbatim. You copy it exactly the same, and then once you've done it exactly the same once or twice, then you have a little more confidence to explore with your own ideas and try things out. So if you're just starting out, yeah, I don't want what I said before to sound discouraging either. As far as I'm concerned, as long as you're making something, it's a step in the right direction. Oh my gosh, we're almost there. Do you know what I'm just thinking about right now? I could have done this a different way that probably would have been a little bit faster. I forgot to mention, another technique. I'm reminded by it because someone keeps asking about a swamp monster puppet, and I built a swamp monster puppet before. I don't see him right there though, but I'll put a link to that down below later too. So if you want to see it, years ago I made a swamp monster puppet, and the whole body is fur, and he's a live hand puppet, except that the fingers are fleece. So that can save some time by doing the fingers in fleece. And I'll show you what I do for that right now. I'm knotting this, and then we're going to move on. That will be pretty much done. Yay. Okay, just knotted that up. Okay, so what I do for that is, if I'm going to do the fingers and fleece, what I do is let me switch over here. What I do is I'll usually draw a pattern like this, where I kind of go like that, and then I make sure you put some notches in so you line everything up. And then I cut that, okay? And then I'll do this part with fleece, and I'll do this part with fur, and then just stitch that seam there, and put the rest of the puppet together the exact same way. That way you have fleece fingers, which can be really cool and add a lot of character. So now that is done, I'm just going to stitch up these sides with the sewing machine, and then we will be in business. Now, there's a couple different ways to do this. So here's my back. I know it's going to be kind of hard to make out exactly what's going on. Here is one arm. Here's the front. And here is the other arm. All oriented the way it should be. Now, I could take this arm, bring it to the sewing machine, stitch here, stitch here. Don't stitch this closed. That's something that I'm embarrassed to say that I have done once or twice before. That's a pain. So you just do down the side and up this. And you can do that on both. And then stitch here and here on the body. And then stitch this together. However, for myself, I like to do it a little bit differently. I like to attach this side to here first, and then this side to there, and the same thing on this side, so that I can do this all in one stitch. This all in one on the sewing machine, and then this all in one. And to be honest, at the end of the day, it doesn't make too much of any difference really at all, but it's just my preference. So that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to pin all this. Now, actually, one more thing I will say, too. It's going to be a little awkward for me to stitch it this way now, because the fingers are already stitched, rather. What I typically do is sew this part together first on the machine. Then I go hand stitch the fingers, and then I go back and do the rest of the machine stitching. I just was so busy talking, being a blabbermouth to you guys, that I didn't even think to do it. Again, make sure you line up those notches. We're going to really start cruising now. Get ready, guys. We are almost there. Make sure you really want to make sure you don't get fur caught in these seams as you're sewing them. It gets easier the more you do it to keep it from happening, but it is a real challenge when you're starting out. So I pin this side all up. And actually, I'll just pin the other side quick so I can do both at the same time. Save a little time. Maybe I can get a question or two while I'm doing this, maybe. See, someone said, "Hey Adam, those flea puppets. Can we get a video on how to make something like that?" I'd love to. Yeah, and actually, if you look at my Instagram, I have a bunch of videos and pictures of the process of those puppets. So I have even the mechanisms moving, being operated without the coverings on, so you can see the springs and the strings and how it's all connected and why things move that way. As well as I believe I talk about it in 2 videos. In the iMech video, but also I have a series that kind of documented my whole building of a set of Audrey 2 puppets for Little Shop of Horrors. And my pod 1 was actually a full mech puppet with not just the wilting leaves like most of it have, which is kind of like the same mechanism as the feelers of the fleas and the ears of Max. But even the mouth of that puppet was a small mechanical puppet too. So be sure to check out that series. Documented pretty much the whole process. Unfortunately, though, I did not video document the building of the final large pod, which is really a heartbreak of mine that I didn't do it. It was just because of time. I just did not. It was down to the wire, and I had to just focus on cranking that puppet out. So unfortunately, I didn't really document it. I think there's a couple small clips on my Instagram, but there's nothing for that pod on YouTube. But anyway, so there we have. That's all pinned up. I'm going to switch over to the sewing camera so we can stitch this up. All right. Ooh. And I actually have white thread in there, but I'm just going to leave it. It's going to be fine. This is a demonstration purposes only, right? Can you see that? Oh, you can see pretty well. Actually, too well. I should have cropped the side out. So one side is done. All right. So let me get this back over here. I'll do this one quick. So that is all stitched there. Okay. Let me get this flat. What did I do this thing? It's all inside out. Hold on. Oh, I hope I didn't stitch something backward. Oh my gosh, did I? I may have had something back. Okay, there we go. Sorry, it was kind of a boondoggle there for a second. There we go. Okay. So, we're good. So now, I'm going to stitch up the sides here on both ends, and then right here. So let me pin it all up. You'll be amazed how it just all starts coming, literally coming together all at the end like this. And actually, maybe I'll do these sides first, and then come back and do the last part. Getting all this fur. Now the fur isn't too bad, again, because I used the blade on the back of the fur when cutting. If you try to use scissors, chances are you'll cut these little fibers off, and then you'll really have a mess. So actually, using a razor blade from the back is also a technique for minimizing that fur mess. However, when we go to trimming, you can't really avoid it. Although, honestly, one thing I tend to do is I'm doing the super fine trimming. Sometimes I'll even just do it outside, but I can't always do that because in Buffalo with the winters and stuff, I can't do that. So just have a little vacuum clear near. I just bought a mini battery powered shop vac that matches all my other tools. So it uses a Milwaukee battery, so I already have all the batteries for it. So I think I talked a little bit about that last video. Yeah, it uses the same battery as my heat gun that I was talking about it with in the last video. Actually, I see a couple of questions again. Let me get back over to this. Okay, yeah. Somebody says, Pesto here says he's seen a trick where people use blue masking tape to keep the fur out of the way so it doesn't get trapped in seams. I feel like I've seen that before too. I think I saw a cosplayer do it on some tutorial once, and they're sewing some fur costume. Yeah, if that works for you, that's totally fine. But one thing I just noticed is the more you do something, you find these little tips and tricks that make things faster for you. So I found this special way of pinning like right up to the edge, like this. Doesn't even allow fur. It doesn't even allow fur to come in. Okay, not really. And if you use more pins, you let even less fur in. So that's just the way I like to do it. Because for me, if I had to do the painter's tape, use paint tape like this is what he's talking about, it would just be an extra step for me. But again, if it works for you, that is no problem. There's many ways to do it. So let me just sew those sides, and then we'll do our last seam. Then I think we'll call it. Okay, where's the seam? Got it. Grab these pins. I'm running low on pins. All right, there we go. Okay. It's the final countdown. Okay. So that's all stitched up. Hands are stitched up. We're stitched up here. Now just this final seam. We're going to put that together, and then we will be in business. I like to start up here to make sure that I get this neck piece really close together first. That's really important. Probably the most important seam to get together. So let's get that first on this edge. And the next seam I want to line up is this seam with the same on that side as well. On this side of the seam and on that side of the seam. Make sure that that is completely even. If it's a tiny bit off because you just didn't think to look at it, it's not the end of the world. But it means it's not put together super precisely either. Which again might not affect your performance, but it's good practice to make sure those seams line up. And our puppet is almost finished. After this last stitch, last two lines here, we're going to have a full puppet body, a sack puppet body. Oh yeah, match up those notches right there. See that right there and there? Okay, I'll do one more pin here. All right. Any more questions? Okay. And get that seam right there. And then get this side seam again on this side. All right, and we're almost there, guys. After this last two seams here, we're going to turn this all inside out, and it'll be pretty clear exactly what everything is supposed to be. Now these notches here. Right there. Good. All right, let me switch to the YouTube camera here, for the sewing camera. There we go. I'll stitch this up, and then I think we'll have it. Got that all stitched up. Let's go over this spot here. Almost there, guys. One more. All right. And I think we go to the top camera. Okay. Here we have it. So let me lay this down flat so you can see what we have here. Have our puppet completely sewn, the whole body, the hands, the fingers are all there. The neck, again, this is kind of a wider neck than I normally do to fit onto this gigantic head that we made in the last video. But I think it'll add a little character. It's not a bad choice, it's just a different choice. And I actually don't have a puppet with a character with that big of a head. So actually, this will actually go great with the wolf puppet I already have. Maybe I can kind of make this like the dad character, since the other one looks very young. That character Howie that I have. So let's just start turning this inside out. Now, with the fingers, I actually like to use a little pencil because the eraser has a good little texture on it. They can kind of grab and push it in, just like that. Pushing that in. Sorry, I got fur on me. All right. Turn those fingers inside out. All right, so that's inside out. Now I'll pull it through just like that. We have our sack puppet. Okay, let me put my hand in here so we can really make sure it's all. Look at that. So it's a little hard to tell because of all the fur. Like I said, in the next video, I'll show you really how to trim around these fingers really well, and then and all the rest of the finishing techniques as well. Because the trimming will come in really good handy with adding features as well. Because you want to trim down the fur all the way down where you're going to glue on your eyes or things like that. So you might get some stray hairs from the first time you're kind of pulling this out. And that's those fibers that were right up to the edge. So look at that. I'll put both my hands in here, kind of show you how that looks. So if you're going to make some hands like this, can't wait to trim these up. They're going to look really nice. Oh, and we may even do the pads. Maybe not, though. Actually, probably not. I'll probably just trim it. I did pads for a polar bear puppet that I made. I'll put pictures of those on my Instagram maybe tomorrow just to show you guys. But anyway, let me switch the camera now to the front facing so I can show you. Sorry, I got the fur on me again. Exactly how it goes on. So let me stick it over this just so I can bring the head up to it. Okay? And then I'll put this head on. Again, next video, I'm going to recover this with fur. At the end of the last video, I decided I didn't want to make it into like a dragon or dinosaur-like character. I wanted to make it into a live hand character, which is better for fur. So I decided to go more with wolf because it has a very kind of wolf-like shape too. So next video, I'll be adding that. Now hopefully this won't fall off, but make sure you find the center back notch, which is right there. You can see that little line there. And I'll pin that to the center back line of this head. And then I'll pin on the center front seam with that center front notch, which is right there and there. Once you have those two lined up, you just kind of evenly go around, making sure it's flush. And again, I normally wouldn't pin it to this. I just want to give you the full effect of how it fits, how it attaches, and how you would sew it on in case someone wants to get started and get this far before we get on to the next video. Really? Oh, it's perfect. It's the perfect length. It fits on there exactly right. There it is. Okay. So now, again, this would be fur-covered hair. Hopefully that's clear enough that I've made that. And then you would just stitch around exactly where that is all pinned right now. However, I'd actually pin it from the inside and turn the whole thing inside out over his head and stitch it. But again, I just wanted to give you the full effect of how this looks. I'll put him on in a second, but before I do that, I'll just leave him like this. I put my a hand in each hand so you can kind of get the full effect of how it would look with two people performing it. So we would have our puppet like this, okay? And another person would be either operating the head, and or I would do one hand and one head, and someone else would do the other hand. So let me put it on kind of that situation, since I don't have another person here. Yeah, there you go. It would kind of be performed like this. So this is how you make a full sack puppet for your sack body for your puppet. So next video, we'll cover this head with fur. We will attach the head. We will do all the grooming, the trimming to make it look really nice, trimming down on the fingers, trimming down around the neck, and some facial features as well. I already have a whole video on how to add hooping to your puppet. Just look up Krutinger puppets, how to make hooping for a sack puppet. And having hooping makes this body puff out really nice. It's not mandatory, especially it's more convenient when you are performing the puppet by yourself, because then you don't have, because then when you perform by yourself with a puppet like this side with the hand is really filled out, but the other side just falls so flat. So when you have the hooping in there, it kind of fills out the whole thing, okay? But if you just have a second person in this puppet right now, it also fills it out pretty well. And again, if you're always going to have two people, if it's like a stage show, you might not need that. But it's a nice thing to have, and can just like make your puppets look really nice. So be sure to check out that video as well. And guys, that's it for today. I'll check to see if we have any last questions, and if we don't, we will just call it. Awesome job, people. Oh, that's a good question. Okay, great. Someone said, if you are performing by yourself, do you pin the arm? First of all, it depends on the situation. If I'm only going to be performing by myself, I will usually pin the hand up. You'll see that often, even in movies and TV shows, that the other dead hand is pinned here. Don't pin it too high. You want it to look natural, almost like he's just like this. Okay? The only time I won't do that if I'm performing by myself is if sometimes with our live shows, we have some people switch. So maybe someone will be doing the other hand and they have to sneak out and do another character, bring that character in, and then that character exits again, and then they slide back into it. So in those cases, it's nice to have it out and available so they can just slip in and out. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And that's it for now. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Please share the videos if you see any value, or if you know someone else you think will get good value out of it. Or even if you're watching this video and you don't even make puppets, which I don't know why you would be watching this video, maybe share it with someone that you want to make you a puppet. You know, I had one student that just didn't couldn't wrap their head around the sewing, so they showed their grandmother the videos and had their grandmother make them puppets. So for situations like that, or if you have a mom or dad or brother or sister or good friend that's willing to do some of the things that you're not quite confident in doing yet, feel free to share it with them. Or if you're a classroom teacher, I have plenty of patterns that are great for simple projects, like the little snoof puppet pattern, which I have a video for that on Instagram as well on my IGTV with a full tutorial on that. The baby shark puppet is a very simple pattern that's great to do, not just for like maybe a simple puppet for a first puppet or for a craft with your kids, but also it's just a great character that you can use. And I've seen so many people do so many cool interpretations of it. And if you do any of these techniques, please tag me in the pictures or videos that you post, whether that's Instagram, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Facebook. If it's at Adam Krutinger for all those places. Across platform, it's all the same for me. So please, please, please tag me in it because I love seeing it. And I share it all the time too on my Krutinger Puppets Facebook page. That's the only place where it's different. Krutinger Puppets Facebook page is the Facebook page. And also, if you have building questions, there's the Krutinger Puppets tutorial Q&A group where I answer a bunch of questions for people too. Sometimes I do little private live videos. I want to do actually more of those there as well. And also, there's a great community of people there that are very helpful. Sometimes they're answering questions before I even can get to it. So it's probably the fastest way to get a puppet question answered if you have one. So thanks so much, guys, and I hope you enjoy. And we will see you next time. Adios. Bye.